Okie dokie. Welcome and good morning to Human Anatomy Part 1, Chapter 1, Part 1. I believe this chapter has 3 sections in it. I combined them for this all into one, but I believe you guys have 3 different PowerPoints. It's okay. It's all the same stuff. All right. So, anatomy, if we're looking specifically at the definition, anatomy is the study of the structure of the human body. Okay? While physiology is the study of the body's function. If you've never heard in biology that structure equals function, your past biology teachers have failed you. Okay? Structure, the structure of something tells us so much about how it functions, what it does, and where you might find it. Okay? So structure equals function. You'll see that a lot in biology classes, both here and moving forward. Okay. As far as anatomy, there are many different subdisciplines in anatomy. As far as the gross anatomy, that's like large scale stuff. We have regional anatomy, and then we have systemic anatomy. Okay. Regional anatomy is referring to like a specific part of the body, a specific area. While systemic anatomy is more so looking at systems, body systems, how they work. So things like, sorry, there's a big old fly. Organ systems, etc. Okay. We also have surface anatomy, and that like tells us where there are some specific kind of markers. For example, their superior orbital ridge. You can feel that. That's kind of the top of your elbow, or not elbow, top of your eyes where your eyebrows sit, right? You can feel that superior orbital ridge. So surface anatomy is referring to landmarks we can kind of touch and find throughout the body. Then microscopic anatomy is histology. Those are the actual cells that are making up the tissues that are doing the things that we want them to do. Your first practical is on histology. We're going to go into histology heavy in the next 2 weeks. Okay? So histo coming down the pike. Some other branches of anatomy, we have developmental anatomy. That's kind of how you grow from being a newborn to being a full-fledged adult. Embryology is the study of how we develop in utero. Pathological anatomy or pathology is how diseases form in a body. Radiographic anatomy, that's like radiology, when you go get an x-ray done, you go get an MRI done. And then functional morphology, that is looking at like a functional MRI. What is actually working in this structure and how do I see it, right? In functional MRIs, you can see brain blood flow through the brain, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So, as far as how these things start, so that was one part. We're moving on to a next new thought. Okay. Now we're talking about structural organization. How do we get the structures that we are building? First, we start at the chemical level. So at the chemical level, atoms will form molecules. A bunch of molecules together will make cells. The cells and their functional units will be what make up that cellular level. Okay. Another word for a bunch of molecules together are macromolecules. Does anybody remember what the 4 macromolecules are? from your gen bio way back when? I'm asking. What you got? That's all of them, all in one go. Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Those 4 macromolecules will make up, hell, everything. Eventually, will make up big components of your cells, everything, all that stuff. Okay? A group of cells functioning together is called a tissue. They are performing a common function. Okay? A bunch of tissues working together makes up an organ. An organ is a structure made up of more than one tissue. Can be multiple different types of tissue, but at least more than one tissue. The organ system level is organs working together for a common purpose. That's like your digestive system. There's a bunch of different organs in your digestive system, and they're all working together to eliminate waste. Your respiratory system, it's everything from your nose to your lungs back out to your mouth, all working together to help you breathe and pull in oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, all of that stuff. Okay? And then the last level is the organismal level. Bruh. I tried. It doesn't want to be over there. Okay? Imagine that's here. The organismal level, and that results from all of those simpler levels working in unison. You are an organism. That squirrel outside is an organism. The starfish in the ocean is an organism that has a bunch of organs and organ systems and organs and tissues and cells and chemicals that make it it. Does that make sense? You with me? Cool. Cool. This is just that image, right? We start at the chemicals, a bunch of chemicals build together, become a protein. Those proteins will make up other stuff. Proteins, all those other macromolecules, will make up some cells. Those cells will join together and start doing stuff. Those are a tissue, a bunch of tissues doing stuff together. Those are organs, a bunch of organs doing stuff together is an organ system, and a bunch of organ systems working together makes up an organism. I know that was fast, but it's just words. They're fine. You're fine. Okay? All right? Cool. So let's talk about some of the organ systems that we will discuss. So the first one that we'll usually talk about is the integumentary system, or your skin. Your skin is the largest organ in your body. This makes me sound crazy. I promise I'm not. But if you skinned a person, they'd have like anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds of skin. Yeah, you have a lot of skin. It covers your entire body. Okay? So it forms the external body covering and protects those deeper tissues, your organs, all of that stuff from injury. Synthesizes vitamin D, which is vital for your bones, for your overall health. There's a couple of, any of you who have taken nutrition, you know how important vitamin D is to your overall just kind of well-being. All right? And it is also the site of a bunch of cutaneous receptors. Okay? Cutaneous means kind of on the surface of. You've heard of your subcutaneous lever or your subcutaneous tissue, stuff like that. That's just below your skin. Cutaneous is just kind of right on top of your skin. So those are going to be sensors like pain, pressure, temperature, all kinds of stuff, right? And then you also find your oil and sweat glands there as well. Okay. So that is your skin system, integumentary system. Next system we talk about is the skeletal system. The skeletal system is your bones, all the bones in your body. We break up this system into two parts, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Okay? And the job of your skeletal system is to protect and support your body's organs. Okay? It provides a framework for your muscles to kind of act on, and it is the site of your blood cell formation. There's also quite a bit of mineral storage that happens in your skeletal system. Okay. This framework one, super important. Framework for your muscles, very important. We will come back to that time and time again, especially in muscles. We'll talk about it in joints. We'll talk about it. We go and talk about it. Okay. Next up, we have our muscular system. Muscular system allows for manipulation of the environment, allows me to do things like pick up this water bottle, throw this pen. All of my muscular system, working with my skeletal system, allowed me to do all of that stuff, okay? Manipulation of your environment, locomotion. Locomotion is just a fancy word for moving. Facial expressions helps you maintain posture, as well as producing a good amount of heat and warmth for your body. There's so many muscles in your face, you're not even ready for it. Don't worry, we're going to talk about it, and you're going to learn them. It's going to be great. Next up, we have the nervous system. Your nervous system is your fast-acting control system. It is quick and to the point. It responds to internal and external changes. Okay? Sometimes if you are too warm, if your outside temperature, you are externally too warm, you will start sweating. How did you start sweating? Your brain sent a bunch of signals to a bunch of other things to say, hey, we need to get rid of some of this heat, open up those pores, let that sweat come out. We'll talk about how sweat forms in the integumentary system. Don't worry, it's all coming your way, okay? And it also activates muscles and glands. Nervous system is my personal favorite, and something that drives me absolutely bonkers. Did you know that jellyfish don't have brains? Yeah, they don't. They just have a nervous system. They just have nerves that react to stuff. They have no brain. How do they live? Doesn't make sense. I'm not a marine biologist, so those questions never required too much import from me. But moving on to the next segment, the endocrine system. Your endocrine system is your slow reaction system. The endocrine system is going to secrete hormones that will regulate things like growth, reproduction, and how nutrients gets used. Okay. So your endocrine system is your slower, I say slow, but it's not exactly slow, but slower than your nervous system for sure. Okay, things have to travel through your blood via the endocrine system to get to their target organs, and that takes a little bit more time than a nerve just going pew, and you have the information that your brain wanted to send to you. Next, we have the cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular is both the heart and the vessels, LE. You'll also find out I can't spell and I can't count, so good luck. And it's right there, and I still spelled it wrong. ELS. So the blood vessels, and they transport, guess what? It's blood. Your blood vessels will transport blood. That blood carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. And it also carries nutrients and waste. And your heart is what pumps that blood through those blood vessels. We'll talk about the cardiovascular system later as well. You don't need to draw this. I'm drawing this for funsies, okay? Cool. Heart preview. Okay. The lymphatic system. We may or may not get to the lymphatic system. If we are running low on time, I will usually cut this one, lymphatic and immunity. But you should know that it picks up any fluid that that may have been leaked from those blood vessels, and it returns that fluid to the blood. Disposes of debris, causes some white blood cells. The immune system mounts attacks against foreign substances in the body. Us hijacking the immune system is how we get things like vaccines, how we get things like vaccines is the only thing I was going for. I don't know where else I was going with that. But vaccines, they usually take a either dead or severely weakened version of a virus, bacteria, whatever it is, introduce it to your body so that your B cells and your T cells can learn what it is, say, hey, we don't like this. Now I know how to fight it. And you go about your day, and next time you're exposed to that same thing, you don't get as sick because your body now knows how to fight it. That's basically how immunity works. And we'll get there if we get there. We might not. Next, we've got the respiratory system. Respiratory system keeps your blood supplied with oxygen. If your blood runs out of oxygen, that means your tissues are out of oxygen. If your tissues are out of oxygen, they will start to die. So that's why you are breathing right now. Are you guys breathing manually or automatically? Ha! Gotcha. Now you're breathing manually. And it removes carbon dioxide. Okay? And then that gas exchange happens in the walls of the air sacs in the lungs. Those air sacs are called alveoli. And those alveoli are made up of simple squamous epithelium. Okay, that simple squamous epithelium. It's okay if you don't know that right now. You will. I said with a slightly threatening grin. You will. Okay? So that's the respiratory system. Next, we've got the digestive system. Digestive system helps to break down food into absorbable units. And stuff that is not digestible gets eliminated as feces. Feces is a fancy word for poop. Not all of your food and not everything that you eat can immediately be absorbed by your body, so your digestive system breaks it down into pieces that are more usable for you. For example, if you are lactose intolerant, your body cannot process lactose as a sugar. So there needs to be enzymes, that's where you get lactate, enzymes that help break down that sugar into more manageable pieces like glucose or fructose or sucrose or something like that. Okay? The urinary system eliminates nitrogenous wastes. You can think of the digestive system as eliminating carbon-based waste, while the urinary system gets rid of nitrogenous wastes. It helps you regulate your water content, your electrolyte content, and balance the acid-base composition of your blood. That's why if you are, God forbid, stuck in a forest somewhere with no hope of rescue, you can drink your pee. It's just super highly filtered blood. To an extent. You can only drink it so many times for all the stuff that it filtered out will just kind of come back and bite you in the butt, but hopefully by then you'll be rescued. Okay? So that's your urinary system. And then the male and female reproductive systems, their job is to produce offspring. Your baby making system. The testes will produce sperm and the male sex hormones. Those are testosterone, some androgens, there are ducts and glands that deliver that sperm to the female reproductive tract. The female reproductive tract includes the ovaries, the uterus, the vagina, all of that stuff. And the ovaries produce eggs and those female sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone. And the female body also does produce some androgens. Okay? These female structures serve as the sites for fertilization and development of the fetus. And then those mammary glands produce milk. Bless you. Anything that has mammary glands and produces milk is going to be a mammal. Except for platypi. Platypi don't count. I mean, they are mammals, but they also lay eggs. Platypi are weird. Don't think about them too much, okay? I try not to. If you did not get all of this information, don't worry too much. We will go through all of these systems. This is just a brief introduction to the systems, what they do, all that jazz, okay? So in anatomy, in science, anywhere, ever, you will use the metric system. Metric system is a unit of measurement to measure stuff. I don't know how to break that down any further. Metric system measures stuff, okay? Your meter, either meter, liter, gram, whatever, will be your base unit. And then the metric system moves in powers of 10. So the next one, a centimeter. A centimeter is 10 to the negative 2 meters, right? So if I have 1 meter, that 1 meter is 100 centimeters. These are equivalent values. Okay? A micrometer is 10 to the negative third of a meter. So 1 1,000 micrometers is equal to 1 meter. All of these are equivalent values. Don't worry, we're going to practice it a lot. Okay? There is one further that we will occasionally go in this class, not too much, but that one is, oh, I was wrong. I'm wrong. Wait. Micro is 10 to the 6th. This skipped millimeters. Millimeters are the ones that are 10 to the 3rd. Hang on. Okay. So 1 million, is it million? I think it's million. Micrometers is equal to 1 meter. It's 10 to the negative 6th. Does that make sense? Kind of. It's okay if it doesn't. We're going to practice it. Don't you worry. Liters. These are just some general. Your base units are going to be those meters, liters, grams. Anything that is not meter, liter, gram is a 10 to the something variation of meter, liter, gram. Okay? And don't worry, we'll talk about that a little bit more in lab as well. Okay? Anatomical terminology is based on Greek and Latin words, and it provides a standard nomenclature worldwide. So if you go to Spain and start talking about the antecubital region, they will know exactly what you're talking about. Okay? That's why we use those Latin roots, and that's part of why anatomy can be so complicated, because you are kind of learning a whole language all on its own. Oh my god, did y'all see that big old fly? Okay. In gross anatomy, we talk about some directional terms. These directional terms kind of help us orient ourselves to where we are, okay? Anatomical position is a set visual reference point. Anatomical position is where a person will stand with their feet together and their eyes facing forward. Their palms will be anterior with the thumbs kind of pointed away. Jesus, big fly. Away from the body. So anatomical position looks something like this. Okay, you need to be a little bit more together, and usually your hands are right by your sides. But for demonstrative purposes, my hands are facing away from my body, or my thumbs are facing away from my body. Hands facing anterior. Anterior is in front. Posterior is the back. Okay, so this is anatomical position. This is a common visual reference point that we use to just kind of orient us to where we are and what we are talking about in the body. Okay. Some regional terms that we talk about. The axial region, that's pretty much your head, your neck, and your trunk. So that's anything that is like directly attached together in your body, head, neck, trunk, all of that stuff. And then the appendicular region is your appendages, your arms, legs, anything that like can get cut off. I mean, technically you could cut off anything, but You get what I'm trying to say there, right? Cool. All right. And then those standard directional terms are used by professionals to describe, oh, sorry, this one is appendicular region, is describe location and we will talk about all of those directional terms in just a minute. For those of you that had lab this morning, sorry, I told you you're going to get that double up. I told you. Also, for you on Thursday, you're going to get this too. To go right along with your activity. It's going to be fun. All right. So you see these terms? You're going to need to know them. I know it looks overwhelming, but I promise they're pretty intuitive. Okay? Like, for example, in the cephalic region, you'll find that the root ceph, C-E-P-H, means head. So that'll tell you you're right in here. Okay? The frontal region corresponds right along to your frontal bone. Again, these will make sense kind of as we go along. Your orbit is right where your eyeballs sit. Your nasal region, can you guess where that one is? I'm sure you can. It's your nose, okay? So stuff like that. These things we'll talk about them as we go, but you will need to learn them, and the lab that we do on this week, Tuesday, Thursday, will kind of help introduce you to these regions and all of that stuff. So there's regions in the front, there's regions in the back. They're all the same. They're not all the same. Okay? So some of those directional terms we use to describe those precise locations, and they're usually paired with a direct opposite. So the opposite of inferior would be maybe superior, right? Superior is going to be that upper, higher. Inferior is going to be a little bit lower. Anterior, the opposite of anterior is posterior or dorsal. You'll see people kind of use anterior and ventral interchangeably, and then posterior and dorsal interchangeably. When you think of dorsal, I want you guys to think of like a dorsal fin on the back of a whale, dolphin, elephant. Elephants don't have dorsal fins, but you know what I mean? Some kind of fish that has something on its back, okay? So dorsal or posterior is going to be at the back. Anterior, ventral is in your front, okay? Medial is talking about towards the midline of your body, towards the middle. Lateral is going out to the sides. That's the other word that's there, okay? And then we have superficial and deep. Something that is superficial, that's going to be like right on the surface of your skin. Deep is going to be deeper in towards your organs, stuff like that. So if I were to ask you, is your nose superior or inferior to your mouth? Superior. Your nose is above your mouth, right? Is your nose superior or inferior to your eyes? Inferior, exactly, right? So that's kind of how we discuss those regional terms. Like I said, there's a few of them. Proximal and distal. Proximal is something being kind of closer to the trunk of your body. When we're talking proximal distal, we're talking about distance from trunk, usually. Sometimes if it's saying something in specific relation to a specific body part, it can change a little bit, but for the most part, I would say that my Fingertips are distal to my shoulder, right? They are farther from the trunk of my body than my shoulder is, right? I could say that my elbow is more proximal, is closer to the trunk of my body than my fingertips, right? My elbow is closer to the trunk of my body than my fingertips. So that's that proximal distal, okay? Ipsilateral, contralateral. Ipsilateral is on the same side, right? Contralateral is on the opposite side. So when you are using your eyeballs, what you don't know, what you will find out, is that what you perceive on your right side gets processed by the left side of your brain. Okay? At some point in your optic tract, they cross, what we call desiccation. They cross. So the information that you get from your right side gets processed by the left side of your brain. Okay? That would be a contralateral kind of processing. Okay? With me? Sick. Yeah. Dorsal, deep, superficial, all that jazz. All right. Then we talk about body planes and sections. Okay? So, a sagittal section is going to extend vertically. A sagittal section is going to divide my body into right and left parts. Okay? A median sagittal plane or mid-sagittal plane, that's going to be right along the midline. If there was like a laser right there that cut me right in half, a mid-sagittal line would cut me into my right and left parts respectively. Okay? That's a mid-sagittal plane. A parasagittal plane will be just off the side of the midline. So say they cut right here, right through like this clavicle. They cut through right here. That's a parasagittal, near to where the midline is. Not necessarily at midline, but kind of just on the sides. A parasagittal plane, and that is offset from the midline. Okay, so sagittal will cut you into left and right. Also, something you guys are going to find out about me real quick. I don't know my lefts from my rights, bro. I can't do it. I'm driving, and I still have to actively, which one of these is left? And even this doesn't work for me. It's a thing. All right, coronal or frontal plane. A frontal plane lies vertically, and divides the body into anterior and posterior. Okay, so a frontal plane will cut me right down the middle, kind of going this way, so that if I cut me in half right here, half of me falls forward, that would be the anterior part, half of me falls backwards, that's the posterior part. Okay, so the frontal plane cuts you into anterior, posterior, sagittal, left and right. Okay, and then the transverse plane, that one is the only one that runs horizontally and divides the body into superior and inferior. Okay? A transverse plane cut me off the hips. The upper part of my body is the superior part, the lower part is the inferior. Okay? You with me? Hell yeah. All right, cool. These are just some MRI scans that are looking at these different cuts in these different planes. So Mid-sagittal plane, you can only see half of the body. You're seeing half of the spine, all of that stuff, the frontal, transverse, all of that jazz. Okay? And clicked restart recording on all slides, and that's painful. So if I do that, just know that it's going to take a little bit longer for the recording to get posted. But here we are, chapter 1.2, rest of the orientation to the human body. Let's get it going. Humans are a part of a very specific phylum called Kingdom Animalia. Well, that's not quite right, but you get what I mean. Humans are animals, specifically, they are chordates. A chordate has some very specific qualities to it that make it what it is. One of the things that it has is this tube within a tube kind of layout. So we start as one tube that is just mouth and butt, and then we eventually become another bunch of tubes that surround that mouth and butt, or tubes. And we'll talk about that a lot more in chapter 3 when we talk about embryology. Okay? So that tube within a tube body plan, chordates have bilateral symmetry. Lateral. Meaning what you see on one side, you will see on the other side, right? So if, again, you cut me right in half on that mid-sagittal plane, the two halves of me would be symmetrical. My right hand lines up with my left hand just fine, okay? So chordates have bilateral symmetry. They have a dorsal hollow nerve cord. Eventually, in humans, that dorsal hollow nerve cord turns into all of your sensory nerves throughout the body. We have a notochord and vertebrae. That will eventually become your brain and spinal cord. Chordates do what we call segmentation, meaning that there are some very specific blocks of body that we can break a human being into. If you've ever seen those, they're kind of like these waves that you see on a human body. Those are those segments that we talk about, okay? And then we have pharyngeal pouches. Those in other animals turns into gills, but for us turns into lungs, okay? For example, a fish is a vertebrae. May or may not be a chordate, but is a vertebrae. Has those pharyngeal pouches, has what used to be a notochord a long time ago. The yellow is the inner tube. The blue is the dorsal hollow nerve tube. The red is the segmented outer tube. And this light purple that you can kind of see is the notochord. Okay. You can see the segmentation there, those notochords, all that stuff. Has a tube within the bigger tube of the overall organism. A human embryo, again, that same tube within a tube kind of setup. Okay. Okay. There it is again. As you grow, the tube within a tube grows with you. But because there are tubes within tubes, there are cavities. So what's one cavity that you know of that contains the cranial cavity? That's going to be the dorsal body cavity. And is the dorsal body cavity on the anterior or posterior of the body? Posterior, yeah. Right. So that dorsal body cavity contains the cranial cavity and the vertebral cavity, which contain your brain and spinal cord, respectively. This is just for funsies. You don't need to draw this. You good? Okay. The ventral body cavity, or the anterior, we also term and call that the thoracic cavity. There's two cavities in that ventral body cavity. The first is the thoracic. The second is the abdominopelvic. The thoracic cavity gets divided. Nobody asked you. Sorry, guys, Siri. The thoracic cavity gets divided into three parts. The two lateral parts each contain a lung surrounded by a pleural cavity. This root, when you see plural like that, not plural like many of, but plural with an E, think lung. Plural means lung, okay? And then we have the mediastinum, which contains the heart that is surrounded by a pericardial cavity. In your lab worksheet that we had, we kind of talked about, there was a little bit about serous membranes and stuff like that, and we're going to get into what that really means like now. But know that the pleural cavity has both an outer shell to it and an inner shell to it, as do most of these cavities. Okay? So the thoracic cavity has two lung cavities and a heart. 1, 2, 3. Okay? There's a lung over here. There's a lung over here. This is not to scale. I hope I don't have to say that. Okay? And then the abdominopelvic cavity, abdominopelvic, is divided into two parts. It has the abdominal cavities, where all of your digestive organs will like to sit. When you think abdomen, think liver, stomach, anything that you use to process and eat food, think abdomen. And then your pelvic cavity has your bladder, some of your reproductive organs, and the rectum. For your study purposes, I would know what organs are in the abdominal cavity and then what organs are in the pelvic cavity. Okay. These are the cavities. This is what they look like. What does the cranial cavity contain? Yeah, your brain. And then the vertebral cavity? Your spinal cord. Cord. Pelvic cavity contains bladder, urinary bladder to be specific, because you have more than one bladder in your body. reproductive organs. And this probably isn't professional, but poop chute. And the abdomen contains digestive things. And thoracic has your heart and lungs. Okay. Looking at it from the anterior view, this is that mediastinum. Another thing that you'll find out in anatomy, anatomists are not very creative. They're going to do the thing that just makes intuitive sense. So your heart sits in the middle of your chest, in the mediastinum, in the middle near your sternum, right? Biologists aren't creative. This is the dorsal cavity. I'm not going to fill all this out. You guys can fill that out later. You know what's there. Even if you don't, you'll find out soon. Promise. Okay. So we also have these things called serous cavities. These serous cavities are generally like a double membrane structure that help kind of protect and keep lubricated whatever organs are sitting below it. Okay? So on the outside, we have parietal serosa, and that is the outer wall of the cavity. And then the visceral serosa covers those internal organs. It is right on top of the organ itself. Okay. Some examples of these serous membranes are the pleura, where your lungs sit, the pericardium, where your heart sits, and the peritoneum, where all of your digestive organs sit. So you can kind of think of these serous membranes as like a bag within a bag. Well, that's not super helpful in terms of saying something, but let's pretend we have like a ball sitting in here, right? Great, it's so pretty. So this membrane right here on the inside, the one that is directly touching the ball, that would be called the visceral serosa or visceral membrane. Okay, the one that is directly on the organ is the visceral membrane. The one that is just outside the organ is going to be that parietal. Parietal, think like a parent who wants to protect their child being the visceral serosa and the organ underneath, okay? The parietal wants to protect, so it's on the most outer layer. Okay? And then serous fluid is just liquid that's made by both of those serous membranes, and it usually helps to just kind of keep things lubricated, keep things moving. You wouldn't want dryness in between the two little sheets of your lungs. That would really hurt. Okay? So that serous fluid helps to lubricate both layers of those serous membranes. So that's the lung, that's the heart. Right? You've got your parietal pericardium, your visceral pericardium, and the pericardial cavity in between. The in-between space. Okay? Same thing with the peritoneum. You have the visceral right on, sorry, let me organize everything a little better. Visceral right on the organ itself. Parietal just to the outside. Let's do parietal in a different color. Let's do blue. Okay, you with me? Sick. Like that. Parietal, visceral. Right. When we're talking abdomen. We break the abdomen up into 4 quadrants. For those of you that are going into healthcare, my healthcare girlies, and that girlies is gender neutral, there are actually 9 segments that you will need to know, but for your purposes, for this class, we'll stick with 4. The right upper and lower, and then the left upper and lower. This is all 9. Know them if you want. If you're going into any allied health, MA, PA, radiology, anything like that, I would know all 9. It's just going to make your life easier later down the road. Okay. Your right upper quadrant has things like your liver, your gallbladder, parts of your small intestine. Left upper quadrant is more diaphragm, spleen, stomach, again, parts of your large intestine. Right and left lower, mostly intestine, a little bit of cecum, a little bit of appendix, a little bit of bladder, a little teeny tiny bit of reproductive organs. Okay. You need to have at least a general idea of what organs go where. So if I were to ask you, what quadrant would you find the stomach in? You would tell me the left upper quadrant or something like that. Okay? So that's that for abdominal quadrants. And now we'll move on to 13.3. Again, I'm going to breeze through this. Do not anticipate seeing too much of this on your exam. Okay? So if you don't get all these notes, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. Microscopy. Microscopy is how we study these small structures, especially in a microscope. There's lots of different types of microscopes. The ones that we use most often are the light microscopes. These are the ones that you'll find in classrooms, stuff like that. Sometimes labs, etc. And you can see things pretty small, probably like bacteria sized. Maybe a little smaller. Electron microscopy. Electron microscopy is super in depth. You can see things as little as a mitochondria with electron microscopy. Okay, so just different types looking for different things. Okay, this is your regular light microscope, but you can see that we can get way deeper into the image itself with the electron microscope. This is talking about how we prepare tissues for microscopy. You guys, well, we might do 1 or 2 tissue stains in lab when we get to tissues. That's going to be next week. Speaking of, when we are preparing slides, things like that, we do stains. An acidic stain will dye negatively charged molecules, and a basic stain will dye positively charged molecules. I'm sure you've heard of a Gram stain. A Gram stain is looking for peptidoglycan in the cell's membrane, and if it's there, it will turn purple. And if it is not, it will be pink, pinkish red. Okay. That's just a little aside. You don't really need that for this class. Like I said, scanning electron microscopes, 3D, whole unsectioned surface. Scanning electron microscopes are insane. They're crazy. And they're super expensive, so we don't use them here. If you go work in a lab, you go into radiology, something like that, you might start using some electron microscopes, and hopefully they train you before you start, because those machines can go up to $1 million. I'm not kidding. And artifact is just stuff that got in the way of your image. Sometimes it's a reflection, sometimes it's a piece of metal, doesn't matter. Artifact is just stuff that is not tissue, minor distortions. X-ray uses wavelengths, electromagnetic wavelengths, to visualize bones and dense structures. That's an X-ray. The dense structures kind of turn up more of this like whitish, clear, and the things that have air in them, like your lungs, end up kind of gray. You can kind of outline the heart right in here. Sits this way. Don't have the whole heart in the image, and then coming up into the aorta, all that jazz. Okay? Cool. And this is intestines. There's poop in there. That's poop. A CAT scan, a computed axial tomography scan. That one does kind of a circular view so that you can kind of see everything in a cut. CAT scan. Looking at everything kind of all at the same time. Or CT. Angiography, that is more so tracing specific vessels. Right. This is an angiography of the heart. PET scan detects radioactive isotopes. Usually only do a PET scan if you've had cancer and are looking for cells that have been tagged with that radioactive isotope from the chemotherapy, right? So usually you only see PET scans in people that have cancer or are being treated for cancer. And then sonography, ultrasound, just uses water, waves moving through the water to produce an image. Anytime you go to the doctor, if you're pregnant, anything like that, you'll get an ultrasound. You can get ultrasounds for all kinds of other stuff. You don't have to get pregnant. PET scan, PET scan. Ultrasound, ultrasound. MRI, similar to a CT scan, just a little bit different, but produces some pretty high contrast in soft tissues. And so it distinguishes based on kind of water content. That's an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. I'm not a radiologist, guys. Cool. You're free.